All right, you guys, well, we are gonna jump right in here with our workflow and album design class that I really think is gonna be workflow unlike any other kind of workflow talk out there. So, and we'll just get started here. I came across this tweet several years ago when I myself was drowning with my own workflow challenges, and it says, "I'm so behind on editing that if I died tomorrow, I would still be putting out albums like Tupac." And I thought that was hilarious, and I had a suspecting feeling that it would be handy someday, so I'm glad I could fulfill that by sharing this with you here. But obviously, we're all, laughing, and that's because we can relate to it, right? So we've struggled with this, and I know people tend to have albums and edits and things very backlogged in our studios, and that's just not a fun place to be. I came across another tweet from a photographer actually local to where I live who said, "It's 5:57 a.m., I haven't slept, and I still have 5 more hours of editing to go to meet deadlines." And when I saw that, my heart broke. And I thought, wow, we all are really having a hard time with this. And there simply has to be a better way. So I'm really hoping that everything that we're going to talk about today can actually change lives. That's a big, heavy thing to say. So I don't know, I'm putting it out there though, but I really believe in what we're going to talk about today. And I think, it's flexible to meet all kinds of different needs and the different ways that people work. But I think that there's a lot of stuff here that can really be powerful stuff. So when I was thinking about this, I thought, why is it such a hassle? Why is a workflow so challenging? And I think there's really a lot of reasons. And I think if we can be aware of those, it really helps. The first thing is sometimes that it's just hard to get started. You go shoot a wedding or you do a bunch of portrait sessions and then you get back home or get back to your studio or whatever and you're like, oh, I have all this downloading to do. And it can just be sort of a laborious start even. So I think that really holds people up. So we'll tackle that. I think also we end up putting a lot of unnecessary steps or processes in our workflow. And those tend to come, I suspect, from when you just sort of do something because you heard that that's sort of how it was done, or somebody mentioned something one time and so you just sort of grabbed onto that and you made it part of your workflow, but it maybe doesn't actually work for you. But sometimes we cling to the idea that it has to be a certain way, even if it's really not working. So sometimes that's part of the problem. Another thing is that we tend to let the ball drop, and I'll explain what that means, but that's huge. And even if we ourselves don't drop the ball, we often create a situation where we allow clients to drop the ball. So we'll explore that. Another big one is using, I say, bad or wrong software, but maybe just not the most helpful software. So I think software tools are a huge part of it, and we'll talk about that. Sometimes I think the proofing process for either the photos themselves or the album can be painful, and people shy away from that because it is sometimes very challenging. And I think pricing and how you can be effective and efficient with that too. So those are all things that we're going to talk about. But just to give you a little bit of an idea where I'm coming from here, I can relate to this whole putting out albums like Tupac and struggling with workflow. For me, my turning point was the summer of 2008, and I was in the middle of a huge explosion in my business. And it was wonderful, but as you can probably relate, it meant no sleeping, it meant no days off for months at a time, it meant missing birthday parties, family events, weddings, showers, all those things, family reunions, I even missed once. And in fact, my schedule was so tight back in those days, one day I got sick and tried to go to the doctor and actually wasn't even able to move a shoot so that I could go to the doctor and be seen. So it was kind of just painful, right? Like, who wants that? So I have been there, I have done that. So if you are feeling that pain, I can relate. And that particular year, I found myself shooting 30 weddings by myself entirely. And on top of all of the weddings, I was personally shooting and editing and booking and servicing 150 seniors. And that was just between the months of like June and September about. So I was bananas. Like totally, that's bananas, right? Like I'm not just thinking that that was bananas. But so I was doing that because I didn't realize it was bananas. And I think sometimes we struggle with that, because we work by ourselves often, right? Like out of our homes, and we don't always, until you go to a ton of conferences and really meet people and watch creativeLIVE and learn all these great things, you sort of don't realize like how what you're doing relates to the rest of the industry, or maybe what's healthier or balanced. And so I was doing this because I could, not because it was smart or comfortable or helpful. I was doing it because I could. And so anyone would call me up and be like, can we book you? And I was like, is there daylight? Or even if there's not, I was like, I will be there. And that's a great can-do attitude, but it does, of course, have a limit. So that's what I was reaching. And so it basically felt kind of like hell. Like I was drowning. But even in my version of hell, I still maintained a 3-week turnaround for everything, which is maybe why it was hell. That's why I was working all the time and all this crazy stuff. But I didn't want my clients to know that I was bananas. So they were like, oh, this is so great. We're getting our stuff in 3 weeks. And I'd be like, yes, here it is. And then like under the surface of the water, I was like, I was just a machine. And when I look back now, I'm like, I don't know how I ate or took a shower, or I remember some of those days I was shooting 4 seniors a day. And I would literally, like I had a 10 o'clock or an 8, I don't remember what the times were, but 4 seniors a day. And I would shoot them, in the morning, and then I would try to like have a bowl of cereal for lunch, and I couldn't even, I poured the milk, and I went to take the bite, and the doorbell rang, and it was my next session. So, and I went and I took care of them with a huge smile, even though my tummy was like, feed me. So it's okay, you power through that stuff, and I think that's important, but it can be better. There is a better way. So I found myself needing an intervention, and I decided that I was going to basically have two choices, 2 different paths that I could take. I could hire some staff, that would be nice, maybe some additional shooters. At that point, I had built a pretty decent brand recognition for myself, so people were calling because they wanted my brand. So I could have hired and trained some shooters and expanded into a big studio and really rented some big space, and that was an option. Or I could adjust my prices, which obviously needed some adjustment. I could adjust my prices, maybe restructure what I was doing, what I was offering in the first place, and revamp my entire process. And basically, the question that I found myself facing was, should I expand, or should I stay kind of nimble and just smaller? And I think that there are advantages and disadvantages either way. And for everyone, I think the answer to that question is totally different, and that's totally fine. But the key is to know yourself and know what works for you. And I decided that I liked being a one-woman show, is sort of how I think of myself. So to me, that was part of my identity, and I really wanted to stick with it. And I like some of the advantages that go along with that, like being able to be flexible. I was concerned that if I expanded, for me, I didn't want to have to worry about the overhead that would be associated with that. I also know that I like to switch gears and do other projects, and sometimes that means taking time off. So I didn't want to have to worry about taking care of my staff and paying them and being responsible for all of that. I wanted to stay small. So for everyone, that's different. For me, I decided to do that. And I needed to ask the question, where do I start? Because I was, like I said, drowning. And it wasn't going to be enough to just get some keyboard shortcuts or some new actions or whatever, right? Like that wasn't going to rescue me. So I really decided that I needed to overhaul everything. So the idea of workflow needed to go way beyond keyboard shortcuts, actions, or a faster card reader, or something like that. I needed to completely redefine this whole thing. So that's what we're going to do today, in case you were waiting for keyboard shortcuts. Those are nice, but that's not going to save you. So we're going to start at the very beginning. And I decided that I was going to focus on a couple of things, because it's not enough to just be efficient, right? Because you can cut corners and you can like do all these little cheap tricks and be efficient, but that's not always effective as well, right? So for me, I wanted to make sure that I was being both efficient and effective. And I thought, if I could be efficiently effective, or now this is a tongue twister, or effectively efficient, then maybe I'm going to be onto something, right? I think there's power there. That might make me an unstoppable freight train of speed. So, and all kinds of good things. So that's what I decided to do. And the difference between those things, of course, is that efficiency means that you're doing things the right way, a way that is, lean. It's going to be fast, maybe cost effective. You're not being wasteful in your process itself. So that's being efficient. Effective means that the things that you are working hard at being so efficient on are the right things to be doing in the first place. Does that make sense? Right? So I want to make sure that I am being nimble and quick and lean and tight and all of those things, but on the things that matter and the things that have actual value. So if you were, for example, in a rowboat and it was leaking, you could, and let's say you wouldn't want to be alone in your rowboat. Let's say that you have a crew of strapping young rower crew guys, right? So they're in your boat with you. Ladies, you love that, right? And they have a bucket because your boat is leaking. So you could maybe, with that type of crew in your boat, you might be able to efficiently use the bucket to scoop all the water out. And with enough people in your boat, you could pass the bucket around so everybody gets a break, and you could maybe keep that up forever. I don't know. But that might be efficient. It certainly would be more effective if you just plugged the leak, right? So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing things efficiently and effectively. We are going to plug those leaks.